WXY equals Z. W is work hard, X is play hard, and Y is keep your mouth shut equals Z, a happy life.
Welcome to the Private Chef podcast, serving the 1%. I'm your host, Hennche, and on our show we speak to the best chefs, how they honed in on their skills to excel in the industry, and what it takes to work as a private chef for some of the most exclusive clients in the world. Welcome back to the Private Chef podcast. I'm your host, Hennche. We've got a real treat for you today, a conversation with Chef Jonathan Bruno. He's been rocking the private cooking scene for over 3 decades, bringing his top-notch skills and passion to the table. Having led the kitchen as an executive chef in a premier Canadian restaurant group, Chef Bruno transitioned to become a private chef. Some of the notable individuals he's worked for include Stuart Copeland, the drummer from The Police, John Mack and Robert Soros, and a bunch of even more important people that we can't mention because we all sign NDAs. He's enthusiastic about revealing his personal culinary journey and is eager to share the secret sauce to thrive in this unique industry. Thanks for being here, Chef.
Hey, thanks. Thanks for having me, Hans.
Yeah, of course. So where did it all begin? Where did your culinary passion come from?
So if you really want to go way, way back, I was a little kid, and I grew up in a big family. We were 8 kids, and I was the 7th son. And, trying to get attention, I cooked pancakes for my dad one day, little silver dollar pancakes. And he couldn't get over how tasty they were. And I was like, oh, so I can get my father's attention if I'm a good cook, And, I think at heart, we're all kind of people pleasers. We make food to make people happy, pretty much. And that's kind of when it started. But, in high school, I got a job as a dishwasher after school. And, like the bottom of the barrel, washing dishes, cleaning toilets, cleaning bathrooms, and sweeping and mopping and all of the crap. And then, the next thing you know, if you stick with it, you're a prep cook. And I was, peeling vegetables and cleaning lettuce. And then the next thing I'm working the line a couple of nights a week. And I was in this restaurant in Jersey in the middle of in North Bergen in Hudson County, which is we were talking earlier before the show about mafia. It's a dirty town. I had this, my brothers had this friend, this guy, Gerard Donnelly, and he had done the apprenticeship program at the Four Seasons restaurant in Manhattan. And at the time, and it held for a long time, it was Lutece and Four Seasons were the 2 best restaurants in the country. And, Lutece was a smaller place that only had so many seats, where the Four Seasons, we pumped it out and we do 500 covers. Anyway, I got an apprenticeship there. And I worked all the stations, and I was a kid. I was 18 years old. And, we were just like, we had the best of everything. It was like heaven, it was really hard work and the pay was crap, but it was, the best of best, we would go out to make extra money during the holidays, and we go into like the Sea Grill in Rockefeller Center, and the other cooks would be like, oh, those are the guys from the Four Seasons. Like, we were like the kings of New York. And it was pretty cool, it was a pretty cool time, And then, I was lucky enough, I finished my apprenticeship. I didn't get fired, and that was something that happened. Like, guys with Culinary Institute degrees would get fired at the end of the year because they just couldn't, they didn't get it. But, while I was there, we got to cook for guys like James Beard and Julia Child and Craig Claiborne and all of these really, like icons that we think of as like part of the American food industry. And we would do this thing called the foursome. And it was 40 people. And it was like 40 of the richest people and maybe 20 of the richest people and 20 of the food people. And they'd get together for this big, and it was just cool, the coolest thing ever, Anyway, I stayed there for 3 years, and then I moved on I worked in Rock Center as a sous chef at the Sea Grill, and then bounced around New York, and then I ended up going back to the restaurant I started at, this place, Lady Jane's, and they had moved their location to Hoboken, and I came back as the executive chef, and I was running the show. I at the time, I say this, it was $1 million kitchen, which was like we had $1 million in food profit a year, which in the late 80s was
when $1 million
real tough.
was still something.
Yeah, when it was, when everybody talks about billions now, but $1 million was like good money. Anyway, I was there for about 6 years, and then I met my wife. She's from Ireland, and I chased her across the sea, and I moved to Galway, Ireland, and I opened two restaurants there. I opened the first Mexican restaurant in Ireland, a place called Salsa. It's not there anymore, and an Italian restaurant in a hotel, and it was great. But I missed America, and we had our daughter, our first child, and we moved back to Southern California. I had family there, and I was looking for work. I didn't know I didn't know what I'd get, and I interviewed at a bunch of different places. A couple places in Beverly Hills, and some in Santa Monica, but this thing popped up that I got a job working for a celebrity up in Beverly Hills, and it was the guy was from Jersey, and it was like being home. Like they were super nice, and in hindsight, I worked for him for almost 8 years, and it was the best of times. I ended up moving back to Jersey. They had a chef, East Coast chef, West Coast chef, and the East Coast chef left, and they said, Jonathan, we want you to come, and I did, and I had a really nice life there. And then around 2001, I kind of got burned out, and you don't see it coming. When you're pulling those 90-hour work weeks, you don't see it coming. And I left, and I went to work for the Soroses, and I worked for them for about a year in Lower Manhattan. Another really nice family. Like I've been lucky in as much as like I've had longevity with good families. And then the rest is I've worked for this guy, John. I moved after the Soroses. We sold our house in Jersey, and we moved down to St. John, and I was freelancing down there, but it was spotty if at best. And, I had little kids. So we ended up moving back to North Carolina and buying a house. I had a friend there, and we moved on to, I couldn't find any work. It was North Carolina, how many rich guys are there in North Carolina? So I went on an interview in New York. I was up for Thanksgiving working. I had some connections, and I was doing a Thanksgiving dinner for this family in Jersey. And my headhunter guy in New York said, hey, I got this guy in Rye, New York, and he's looking for a chef. So I went up and interviewed. In the interview, they said, well, you live in Rumson, New Jersey. And I said, oh, no, I live in Wilmington, North Carolina. And they said, you're kidding. And I said, no, I'm not kidding. And they said, we own a home on Figure 8 Island in Wilmington. And I go, oh, that's like right by my house. And they're like, yeah, that is right by your house. And they were like, well, we'd like to offer you a job, but down there, you don't have to move up here. And I was like, okay.
Wow.
And again,
man, that's like match made it happen. Who would have thought that it plays out so beautifully for you?
A million years, right? Like, you never think of it like that, right? And I ended up working that was John Mack. I ended up working for him for almost 9 years. So, yeah, a long time. And then, my kids had some health issues, so I needed time. And I left working for him, and then I've been bouncing around. I ended up working for this family in Manhattan for almost 9 years in Manhattan, and they're in Southampton, and in between there was another guy, a hedge fund guy who I worked for about 18 months, and again Jersey, Southampton. So yeah, you guys, the drill, how we do this, right?
So let's unpack this a little bit, because, so many of us are happy to have like one stand where like, yeah, it's 5 years, 9 years, but you've mentioned like 3 of those, like really long. So that's like an ocean of experience in itself that you're having. But how did that turn out that they wanted you to actually be in Wilmington, but they originally hired for New York? Is that something that just clicked, or did they always mean to bring that chef down there?
No, they wanted a chef in New York. And that's what their original theory was. John and Christy said, what we're looking for. And I told him, and I told him everything that like where I've been and what I've been doing. And when as soon as I said that I lived in North Carolina, they like couldn't believe it. Like the odds are astronomical. I mean, I knew like I did like he didn't like the headhunter didn't really give me much info on him. And they never do. Like they'll give you a name, and then again it was 2000, it was maybe 2003 or two. When was it? It was wild. The internet was not what it is now.
Yet.
It was 20 years ago. So yeah.
Let's dive in that perspective a little bit. So when you got your first private chef gig, the internet was not a thing. The way we get clients today was not a thing. How did you originally get in touch with the very first family? Okay,
so I was in LA. I just moved there, and we got an apartment in Venice. We had some dough saved from being in Ireland, and I was willing to take anything. But my old boss was the chef on the East Coast for this family, and she put in a good word for me. I came in, and the trick with that guy was actually the family was that not so much the cooking was important, but they like repetitive stuff. So I had to make this salad, and they had it with every meal, and it was radicchio, endive, and romaine with saga blue, raisins, walnuts, and this bottle dressing. But it was good. It wasn't a bad dressing. Don't get me wrong. It was it was Gerard's champagne dressing, and it's like tasty. It's sharp, and it's but that's what they wanted, and everything else was. And then like I made dinner, and they were like, "Man, you're a good chef." And I go, and I don't want to say because it was my first gig, like my first gig as a private chef, because I'm used to working in restaurants and yelling at people, and like, what the fuck are you talking about? Of course, that's
So you started yelling at them.
You can't say that stuff anymore. You can't be a jerk. But they were like, and they offered me the job immediately, and just like that, like I often say this. I don't believe in God, but I believe in luck. And man, I've been where I'm from in New Jersey. You would never think that a guy like me would end up all over the place. I mean, I'm in Wisconsin now. Like, if you would have told me when I first started doing this that I'm in the Midwest cooking, and we were talking about this before the interview. Like it's cold here in the wintertime. It's freezing, man. It is. It's kind of freezing. But the family I work for now are super, man. A really nice family. 4 kids, 2 adults, some support staff, but they're really decent family. So yeah.
So out of all the different families and kind of the different experience that you had, what would you say are the crucial pieces to make a long-term relationship work for the family and the chef?
That's a good question. I don't know. Like for me, it's been, I always make myself available. The real trick, I think, to this business, and it's been my experience over the years, is that, and I only had to learn because I had to learn it on my own. I didn't have anybody else showing me what was that, over the years, you get the job and you get in, but the real trick is to gradually give them a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and not lay it all out on the table right away, because then you're left with no surprises. And, like when I was working for the Max, he had just got a job back, and he was working for Morgan Stanley. And he sat us all down and he told me my cooking was terrible. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like I know that I'm good at my job. Like I got a good palate. I have a super palate, and I know the mechanics of it all. Like I know how to make sauces. I know, like, I was trained properly. It wasn't about me. It was about him. And I said, fine. And I started cooking for myself. And they were amazed. And I'm like, well, I know why you're amazed. I haven't really changed anything, but I just stopped working for you, and I started working for me. And I stayed there another 4 years. So, it definitely worked out. But,
I think that's something important that you just brought up, is that sometimes the feedback is not based on what is actually going on in reality on the plate between the kitchen and I sometimes I see it. It's almost like you have to be a psychologist at the same time. When the client comes into the kitchen and like suddenly they're looking at the pantry or the fridge, and you can see them like almost like they're picking at something. I'm like, oh, you're having a bad day, right? Like, do you want me to get you some of your favorite snacks or something? Like,
or do you want to take a nap, or you want me to get you a
yeah.
blanket? You know, I get that. Yeah, for sure. You know, and that's the other thing. Like, we're working for the richest people on the planet, and they're bitching about, oh, you bought too much milk. Like, you know, really? That's what you're doing.
You know, I think this is actually one of the funniest ongoing themes in every other household. It's like either the pantry is too empty or it's too full, and it seems like so hard because it's not based on the real pantry. It's based on the mood, you know, like. And I don't know what it is. Like, it freaks them out if there's little food in the pantry. I'm like, why? Everybody has plenty of food. Everything is there. Like, why do you want me to stock up even more? And then sometimes when there is more, they're like, why is there so much of this? Like, you asked me to buy more.
The best is when they tell you to get rid of sweets, you know, like it's been I don't know if you've seen this, but you know, they're like, oh, you got to get rid of all the ice cream. And then like a week later, they're like, where the fuck is the ice cream?
I've seen anything from locks on the cupboards to like throw it all away just so that when I get gasoline in the car, I see like a whole set of open candy bars and everything that was bought on the way back home from the golf club.
Yeah, for sure. When I worked in California, that first family, they always had caviar in the house, which is nice, you know, but they'd leave for 6 months at a time. So every time that they were in town, at the end of it, I'd end up taking caviar home. And my daughter was little, and I remember her being like 3 years old and like scarfing caviar like it's going out of style. I'm like, man, that's great. My kid has this like you know, like, and that's the other thing about being a chef and having children is that they all eat, like they all have great palates, and they're not afraid. And it was not like that. Like I go back to that first family, and I think how blessed I was to have a family like that did not care about what they were like. Reload when we come into town, we want it all brand new. Reload, throw away whatever's old. Like, they didn't care. Like, it was not a thing. Whereas some people were like, you know, you're buying too much milk.
It really depends. Like, I've seen both extremes, and sometimes it drives me a bit crazy to think how many vacation homes there are all over the US. Like, Southampton alone has hundreds, and so many of them like, we're leaving at the end of the summer, just get rid of everything. And you're like, and they mean it. They've been like, from the salt to the oil to everything else, just get rid of everything and buy new everything in spring.
You know, I'm always amazed at the wealth. Like, I don't think we think of the wealth in this country as being, you know, like most ham and eggers, you know, people who are working in restaurants and doing their jobs. And they, like, the last time I flew into LaGuardia, we had to go over Westchester. We did that circle over all those enormous mansions. Like, they're like everywhere. And we forget that there's this astounding wealth in this country. For the last guy I worked for in New York, again, who I can't talk about, but I can tell you this. I made salmon one night, and he looked in the fridge. I had 2 pieces left over from dinner, you know, because you never know, right? If they're going to want more. He looked in the fridge, and he said, Jonathan, why are you making so much salmon? I'm like, the guy was worth $22 billion. With a B, not a million, a bill, you know. I'm like, you're worrying about that, really? Yeah.
Maybe, see, that's, sometimes I wonder, sometimes I really wonder when I see those little attitude things. Like, I'm telling you, I was working with a guy, same, with B, not just the M. And he was like, hey, can you check this fridge? And I told him, I'm like, hey, most of your favorite beer is like 2 months out. And he's like, keep it, I'll still drink it. And I'm like, wow, does
skunk beer. And you're German, you know good beer.
You wanted to give it. He's like, no, it will be fine. I can still drink it.
Yeah, nothing worse than skunk beer. I got to tell you, it's like drinking Canadian beer. It's all skunky. You know, it's got that stink to it.
But it makes me wonder which of these attitudes or like got them there. You know, some of that stuff is the stuff that gets
Oh,
them
yeah.
there. Like I'll give you an example. I interviewed for it was posted as a job position for a chef, and it was the Aston Lauder family. So they're also in like the, I don't know, 20 billion something.
Oh, yeah, tons of money.
And they, first of all, they completely low pitched the position, which already made me a little bit like, why are we having a conversation below six figures for a private chef in New York City? And then they were like, yeah, and you're also supposed to like clean the bathroom and iron. And I'm like, wait, I feel like you used to have a housekeeper that used to cook on the side. Is that what?
Yeah.
And they're like, yes, that's actually what happened. We used to have a housekeeper and she turned. And I'm like, you're looking for the wrong, like your job description. You're not looking for a chef, but you keep interviewing chefs. Like,
it's more they're looking for a slave who will do everything. Like that ended in 1865 for sure. You know, like.
But the interesting thing was that they that the family office as well as the family thought that's still possible, but they probably had somebody there for 30 years who they maybe treated well. I don't know, maybe good insurance package, whatever they had, and they completely, even for a housekeeper, I think in New York you can't hire a housekeeper for these kind of houses at that price range anymore.
Yeah, it's I always go back to like my first gig after the family in California. I got a job working for the Soroses, and it was a good gig. You know, they offered me $100,000 a year in 2000, which was a lot of bread.
Yeah.
But it was you translate that to these days dollars, that's more like $200,000. It's at least doubled, and with inflation, you know. So you get people who are like, well, I could never pay you that. Like I think also, especially with generational wealth, you know, like people who didn't actually work for their money, they don't see it. They see it like they're doing me a favor. And I got to tell you, you know, we all work hard. We we try and do our best. And it's not like that at all. Like we give it everything. We give it our all. And that's been my experience, you know, and that's just it. You know, we were talking about guys who want to get into this business and, you know, there's a lot of sacrifice, you know, like not as much as when you're a chef in a restaurant though. Like I always tell people, they say, oh, I want to open a restaurant. I said, well, here's the deal with a restaurant. You know, your kid has a broken arm. Well, your wife's going to have to take him to the hospital because you got to service it on a Saturday night. You got service, and there's no way you're getting out of that because, you know, you got to be there. Or your kid has a baseball game. Sorry, can't make it. You got, you know, purveyors coming in, and, you know, like it's that kind of work. You know, it's not like we don't work 9 to 5 Monday through Friday.
But wouldn't you say it's the same as a private chef? Like when my clients schedule me, there's nothing I can do. Like
oh yeah, unless you're dying, you know, unless you're in a hospital, you know. But
by the way, I just did the math for inflation adjusted. 100K in 2000 is 175 today.
Exactly. Like the first family I worked for. In 96, I was pulling it down, man. I was living in Venice, had a really nice apartment right on the beach. I made $86,000 my first year there. And I did the adjustment. It's like $190,000, like real money. But, you know, and you try and tell people that, and they're like, yeah, that doesn't sound like something I want to pay, you know. But you see the odd jobs here and there. And I think I read an article that was posted about how restaurant chefs are disappearing and they're going into private service because people can pay. And we were talking about that earlier, how when you got the dough, you can have anybody show up and cook for you. You know, it's kind of like that. So, yeah. Like when I was out in California, we had Wolfgang Puck's crew from Spago come in and do a birthday party. And I remember, who's the guy? It was like this famous organizer. He did Don Henley's wedding and was in People magazine. And he was like this caterer, but he was a good guy. But at the end of the birthday party, his crew, like it was late. It was maybe 11 o'clock at night, and his main guy I said, hey, you got to get these tables out of the house, put them out in the courtyard. They got to go. They can't be in the house. And he wanted to have a fight, like a fist fight with me. And he was like, I ain't doing that. That's not my job. I'm like, you're the caterer. Get rid of that stuff. I'm like, the principals were sitting in the little cove, just chatting. And I'm like, let's talk about this outside. And we had the talk, and he got everything sorted out. But, like we have this kind of decorum where we don't do that kind of stuff in front of the people we work for. So, like there's just no talking to that guy. Man, he was steamed too. But, every once in a while you get people from the real world who or I had a waitress come in and help me one time in California. And the missus was like, the first thing she said to me was, Diet Coke, lots of ice. She didn't say hi. She didn't say anything. I was like, yeah, whatever. I got a Diet Coke, lots of ice. I didn't care, But she said that to the waitress who had come and help. And she was all offended. I'm like, yeah, well, that's what you signed up for. You never know most of the time they're nice people, but you never know.
One of the families I worked in, I think the principal, the husband, he barely acknowledged me as a human being for the first 2 months. He would walk straight past me, or he would just put a bottle of wine in front of me and not say nothing but just open.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, man.
Yeah, for 2 months, right? It's like a cat peeing on something to say, oh, it's mine now, have to show that dominance, and I definitely have said, I don't care. I'm at this point. So, on a sad note, a couple of years ago before I moved to Wisconsin, my oldest daughter got cancer and died, and it was horrible.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I have this just awful, just I can't even, words cannot explain the pain of losing a child, but it's been like this, right? So we talked, I was with her the whole time. I was with her at New York hospital. Those hospitals in New York, by the way, if you're going to die, it's a great place to be. They were really, above and beyond. But in any event, I have a different perspective of my job. I'll say and do things that I didn't do 20 years ago. If somebody says something that's out of order, I'll immediately say, that's not okay. And, people are a little, rich people are a little taken aback by that. They're not used to it. But these days I'm like, I got maybe, if I'm lucky, I got another 10 years of my career. If I'm lucky, why not do what needs to be done? It doesn't mean that I'm not going to cook well, or I'm not going to do my job, or, don't talk to me like that. I'm not an animal,
Yeah.
So I definitely draw the line with that stuff these days. With that, here's the bottle of wine, that kind of stuff. I just not anymore. There's more to life than that. And that's just it too. We have, our jobs have taken us places that, I was telling you before we started, I thought I was going to live and die in New Jersey, and never see anything. And, this profession has taken me everywhere. I've been all over the place. I was in St. John 2 weeks ago, down on the verge of these folks that I work for now. Just bought a house down there, and it was, I used to live there. It was fabulous. It was nice to be there and not have to worry about money or anything. I was, and they were great. They gave me 3 days. I had 3 days off. I was at the beach and, just swimming in that blue water, and I forgot how lovely the world is, and I hate to say it, but this generation that we're in right now is what do they call it? We're the folks that got on the last helicopter out of Saigon, because the world is, if we don't know by the end of this summer that the world is burning, the world is burning. So let's enjoy it.
Oh, man.
I've been lucky. I've been really lucky. My second daughter, the one she went around the world when she worked for a summer for this family out in East Hampton, and she saved up all her money, and they would have all these private chefs show up, and she would say things. It wasn't that she was trying to be nice. She'd say, Dad, I think that you running a restaurant made you into the better chef. Being in the business, as opposed, I don't know, I met a couple of guys who never worked in restaurants, who didn't, and they were okay, they were okay at their job, but we would do this farm party for this guy I worked for in LA and New Jersey. And it was 500 people, me and I'd get a crew together and we'd work for 24 hours straight. And we would do, it'd be 500 people plus a mariachi band, plus a regular band, plus the rodeo that would come, plus all the crew part that we'd grab all the bartenders from Barney's in New York City. And because they like the margaritas they make. I guess, when you think about that, we really love the margaritas they make. So we want all the bartenders from Barney's to come to this party and bartend, And, organizing that was monumental. And it was part of what we're trained to do. Like, we're trained to cook for a lot of people, and to do it at a standard that most people don't.
Yeah.
It's not McDonald's. We're making good food and making people happy. At least that's been my experience. I don't know about you, Hans, but
I have like some really good, solid restaurant experience, but also larger catering experience when I used to work for the Formula One, and we used to be in the paddock club for the VIP areas, which sounds exclusive, but when you're in the Middle East and there's like 7,000 VIPs on the then you're like, okay, this is like a very high level of excellence that you're trying to deliver, but it's also volume. And I think that gives you a lot of organization. As you said, you have skills to be organized and see things at a different spectrum, different lens than if I was just used to cooking for 2, 4, 5, 6 people. And then I would get very nervous, Like, I'll give you an example. Like a month ago, my client was like just casually slipping in 18 people at night and told me the menu around 2:30 p.m. And I think without that kind of experience, I mean, I didn't love the experience, but I pulled it off.
Exactly. And that's just it, like it would be like that. Like when I worked in Jersey and LA, I come in and I'm making dinner and I'm thinking, oh, well, it's just them for dinner and the kids and the nannies. And then the missus comes in and says, oh, Sheryl Crow's coming out for dinner with her boyfriend. I'm like, oh, fuck, what am I going to do? Like, but I always, you always keep a well-stocked pantry. And, the old chef words of wisdom are, we're not out of anything. We're just making more, and it was, like, we're in the middle of making more. So we'll definitely have more. So I'd have dinner on the table. Or they'd be like, when I worked in Jersey, they never knew if they were eating at the farm or at the house. Farm and that, we had this Chevy Suburban. We called it the Chuck Wagon because we'd be going back and forth. And then we'd be halfway there. And it was, like it was early 2000s or late 90s. And we had company cell phones and these monstrosities, these big big cell phones. And we get the call and like, oh, we're eating in Rumson tonight. Anyway, this where all the farms are in Jersey. And then we'd go back and forth. We'd be like halfway there. And we'd have to turn around and come back and be like, But it was great. The other thing about that first family is they weren't afraid to pay, and they always had lots of staff. There was always lots of help. You never were stuck as far as that goes, which is kind of a thing these days, like I wish we had more help, but over time, I think things, either they get better or they stay the same, so it's great when you can go into a house and there's people to help. It really is.
I agree. And I think that's a crucial piece. And maybe you can speak to that. So one of the things I notice is that it's usually older people or maybe older money that tends to understand the value of having the help that's needed. And it's usually more like the younger families, maybe even tech money or so, where I felt like there's an educational process there that they have to go through in order to understand what is needed to make things happen. And that I'm not an octopus who can serve drinks, barbecue on the other side of the house, run back in the kitchen to do the fries and, just do it all myself. And,
without a doubt. Definitely the older folks were like that. Like when I worked in North Carolina, I had a staff waitresses that helped me, and I made sure they were well paid because I wanted them to come back. Like when I worked in Jersey for the Celebrity, it was people came and they were like, "Oh yeah, I'll come," like and I guess I can get around this, right? So I had a sous chef and I had a waiter at when I worked in Jersey. The guy I was working for was getting inducted into the Hall of Fame, and he said, "Hey, we want to do a party at the World of Astoria. we have Frank Sinatra's apartment, and we want you and the guys to get a crew together and cater. And we both were like, yeah, we can do that. Like, it was really cool. Like, there was like anybody that you could think of in rock and roll was there. It was Clapton and Paul McCartney and Lenny Kravitz and Bono and like you name it, all these, Neil Young, and just like everybody you could think of was there, right, up at the party. And we pulled another 24 hour. We pulled it all together in 24 hours. We had it all ready to go. Moved into the suite. We got to see the show, and it was the best. I have my best friend Joe Valentino. He was a waiter back when I worked in restaurants, and I called him up and I said, Joey, I need you to work tomorrow. And he goes, oh, Jonathan, I'm tired. I can't. I said, oh, well, it's for Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in the city. He goes, what time you want me there? So,
you could write the book Kitchen Confidential for private chefs. It sounds a bit.
Oh, my
it sounds a bit like that.
And that's like I can only tell some of the stories because some of them are like really like just. You can't talk about on, not publicly. It's,
I actually interviewed one chef. It was one of the first interviews I did. And I was so shocked he went all out on the podcast. And he also wrote a book, giving it all away. And I was like, you will be sued left, right, center. And I cannot publish the episode because I want no part of this.
Oh, yeah, for sure. They say that they don't really count anymore, the non-disclosures, but I don't know. Like, I don't want to kiss and tell, I don't want to be telling about people's private lives. I don't care,
At the end of the day, I think, it's part of the integrity of what we do is just like, you do what you say. And if you shook hand on something, said like, hey, I understand you want this level of privacy, then I'll just respect that.
Yeah. For sure. It's the right thing to do. And that's, that also comes with the, I remember when my first night working in California, I came home and my wife was waiting at home with the baby, and I got in and she said, so how was it? And I said, I can't believe how happy this is the best day of my life. It was so much, it was the best. And, if you've ever worked in LA, everything's a half an hour away. So you get on the 5 and you take it all the way down to Santa Monica, and, half an hour later you're home. So whenever you finished up, you're guaranteed it would be a half an hour drive. Didn't matter what time of day or night. But I got home and she was like, so it was good. And she goes, and I said, I felt like I was in a dream, it was just like heaven. And I was just doing my job. And I didn't know at that point that if I had the job, it was my first night. And they called me that morning, the next morning, and said, look, we want to hire you. What do you want? And I was like, wow. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Luck and hard work,
I mean, it seems to be that the harder we work, the luckier we get, right?
Yeah, right. That's true.
3 decades, so many different families. One of the things that is always mysterious and maybe having so much experience with it is, how did the tipping change over the last 3 decades, and maybe also over the different kind of families that you worked with?
It hasn't changed much at all. Like, it used to be the standard, like when I worked in Jersey, it was end of the year, you got $2,000, like in cash, which was nice. It was always nice to get cash.
Yeah.
Please don't tell the IRS, okay? And then, like, I worked for this guy a hedge fund guy in Jersey, and after my first year, he gave me $25K on the books. I was like, well, that's fucking excellent, But then the next year, he got remarried, and it went back to $2,000. So, so it was kind of, and after I left, they replaced me with 2 chefs. So that tells you what kind of work I was doing. They were like, They couldn't believe that one guy did all of this stuff, Anyway.
But this I kind of like that sometimes, when you go, that's only when they realize how hard you worked for them and how you, and I left the position a couple years ago, and like even years later, some of the house stuff still like Hannes, they still don't live up to what you were doing here. And the family knows and the assistant knows, they're like, you did a different kind of job here.
Yeah, for sure.
And it feels good in hindsight, even so it might have sucked because you don't get that appreciation when you go through the valley of pain, you know, and they don't see it. And then there's this disconnect. I'm like, wait, how can you not see how hard I'm working to make things happen for you?
Like you're there it feels like you're there 24/7, you know. And that guy that I work for in Jersey, he in North Jersey, and but one day I got wagyus, so I grilled a bunch of wagyus, and I served it with, you know, scalloped potatoes and cream spinach. And he said, "What's that green stuff?" And I said, "It's cream spinach." He said, "What, am I getting punished?" Because he didn't eat spinach, you know, like, but it was delicious. Like, who doesn't like cream spinach? Clearly him, you know. So, but, you know, he ate everything else. So.
Well,
but, you know, yeah, you get that, you know, you get that with people. Like, you know, do they actually see how hard you work? I'd say for the most part, no, you know, especially with people in generational wealth. I hate to say that they'd never really worked. Like, you know, like what we do, we work, we really work. Like on our feet, we're doing our job on our feet. I remember I was working for Stuart Copeland this summer, and you know, it's rude to smoke around the house. We were out in Malibu. He had rented a house out in Malibu, and I went out by the garbage cans back towards the front of the house, and I was smoking a cigarette. And he came up and said, "Hey, what are you doing over there?" And I said, "I'm smoking a cigarette. What does it look like I'm doing?" And he was like, "Oh, okay." And he was a smoker too. So, but, you know, again, you know, it's all perspective, I think. But it's been a good gig, man. You know, it's been a pretty good run. Like I have the life I never expected. Along the way, I got to do other things. You know, like I picked up guitar, and, you know, if you saw my house, I have like a zillion guitars, and I do photography. So, and not food photography, you know, regular photography.
Yeah.
And I have a zillion cameras. In fact, they're all going on Craigslist today. I'm trying to clean house. So, you know, I got other stuff. And the other thing is, you know, when I was doing my apprenticeship at the Seasons, the other thing was, you know, there are things that I learned that I didn't know that I could learn, you know, like how to sharpen a knife, how to use a stone, how to do like the little tricks, like just from working on the veg station of throwing a pinch of baking soda into the kettle to make things greener, you know, like little things that you don't, you know, like you look back in hindsight, you know, people ask me, these folks I work for now, they say things like, "Well, how do you know that?" And it's kind of like if you've ever seen that movie Slumdog Billionaire.
Yeah. Millionaire.
Like, he's answering questions because he's actually lived. And that's what we've done. You know, like somebody says, "Oh, how do you know how to cook a steak medium rare?" And I said, "Well, I worked a pit at the Four Seasons, and it was charcoal. And I was taught the first night how to do it, and I listened. I wasn't drunk or anything, which was a lot of drinking going on back in the 80s in the New York restaurant scene. I paid attention, and, you know, pre-theater, we do 200 people. And then main service was another 200 people. And then after theater was like we do 500 people a night. And, you know, a third of it was coming off the grill. So, yeah, you get good at shit, you know, by doing lots of it.
Yeah,
so.
and that's really it. You get good by doing volume. And I think this is, again, tying back what we said earlier, is where restaurant experience and catering experience can make you a lot better, even as a private chef, because you have so much experience that adds to the skill set that allows you to wing it when it's needed and make stuff happen. Yeah,
the other thing is, you know, you think, like, I've had days where they've loaded me down with way more people than I was expecting. I'm thinking, I'm never going to get through this. I'm going to make a mess of it all. And then, like, as it gets closer to time, you're like, "Oh yeah, I can do this. Like, it'll be fine," you know. And the other thing, if I can impart any wisdom to any other people who are cooking out there, the first thing I learned in the Seasons, and I passed it on, like, I had a pastry chef, my friend Leslie Ross. She said, "How do you do it?" And I said, "Clean and organized is the only way to fly. You leave your station clean, you can do anything. As soon as it starts piling up and is a big damn mess, you're screwed." And it has been my experience that clean and organized wins the race every time. And it's like common sense, but, you know, some people, like I've worked with guys who went to Johnson and Wales or or Culinary Institute, and they were like inept, like I don't like you paid 30 grand, 40 grand for an education, and you can't you can't even keep it together,
That was one of the funniest things. When I first came to America, I couldn't believe that people drop so much money, go into debt, go to these schools, and then come to our restaurants and don't know how to cook.
Exactly. Yeah, I remember my old chef at the Seasons. This guy, Hennche, he passed away a few years ago. He used to say, I said, yeah. He said, Bruno, what are you doing? He used to yell at Bruno. What are you? He's a German Swiss, grouchy as fuck, but really nice guy. Really like a good-hearted man. And he'd say, I was doing some after work at this club in the city, like one of those athletic clubs. And I said, yeah, they want to test me to test cook. And he said, either you can fucking cook or you can't fucking cook. And he said, why would they test you? Like, yeah, you're right. You'd hear things like that and you'd think, yeah, that makes perfect. Either you can cook or you can't, like you can do the job or you can't. And, you find out pretty right away whether you can or you can't. That's been my experience, at least.
Well, Jonathan, what would you say is like the one thing that you give chefs that are moving into the private space, aspiring chefs in restaurants? What would you tell them to make it happen for themselves? That's easy advice. It's speak when you're spoken to, keep your mouth shut, and do your job. What's the Einstein theory? The Einstein theory is X, Y, Z. No, W, X, Y equals Z. W is work hard, X is play hard, and Y is keep your mouth shut equals Z, a happy life. So I think that's the formula, right? So, keep your mouth shut and keep your head down, do your job, and try not, like be interactive, but, some people don't like to be talked to, like you said, the guy didn't talk to you for 2 freaking months, but I always think, if they want to find out when the time comes, then you talk, but the real proof is in the pudding, like what your cooking is. And again, my other words of advice are, I don't know if you ever heard of this band called the White Stripes, but the drummer, Meg White, and she said, I may not be the best drummer in the world, but I am the best drummer in the White Stripes. And I look at it like that. Like there are some chefs that I think of myself as a ham and egger. I don't think of myself as some fantastic chef that deserves a Michelin star or any of that stuff, But I know what people like, and I know how to produce it. When you're on an interview and they give you parameters of what they like and what they don't like, stay away from what they don't like and make what they like. That's really, you know what I mean? Be the best drummer in the White Stripes if you're going to be anything. I agree with that. That's really if you master that. And I just dropped an episode a while back about food psychology. I'm like, all you need to find out is what do they love and crave, and cook that. That's it. Like, just find out what do they love, what are like their childhood flavor profiles that they love to eat on certain days. If you know how to get in that space, you're golden. Yeah,
for sure. I remember when I worked in North Carolina, the summers were busy because that's all I worked was, I worked May to October. So by October, they couldn't fit in their clothes anymore. It was kind of funny. You'd see people expanding over the summer. They were working out and they were doing everything they needed to do, but pants tended to get tighter, and the same thing was for that last family I worked in New York. Like the gentleman would look like by the end of the summer, he'd be like, "Man, my pants are really tight." He'd be bitching about it. Like, I don't have a gun to your head to really eat all of that food. You could have left some on the plate.
I guess that speaks for the chef.
Yeah, the other thing is portion control. Like, always start out small and leave stuff. And if they want more, you can always make more, But especially with, female clients, you'll find that, you need to keep things, lighter and smaller. Always the missus, I always make a smaller plate. It's just, it's mathematics, it all makes sense,
Yeah, half the body size.
For sure,
Well, Chef, thank you so much for making the time and, giving us so much insight into 30 years of private chefing. That's quite a career you had.
I'm glad it was a giggle too, like I was I got to tell you, I was a little nervous before I came on, and I'm pronouncing Hannes is your name.
Yeah.
And I'm calling you Hans, and I apologize.
No worries, no worries.
Like when people call me John, I fucking hate it. I'm like, my name is Jonathan, like.
That's actually the reason why so my original name is Johannes. And when I first came to the US, people were calling me Joe or John. And I'm like, wait. None of that is my name. It's either Johannes or, okay, let's stick with Hannes because that's so random. Maybe you make a Hans out of it, but you don't call me Joe Schmo,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, my first chef was Seppi Rangley, but his real name was Giuseppe, but everybody called him Seppi. So with an S, which was there's no J in there, but it was kind of nice, like he was like the first celebrity chef. Back in the day, he was in Vogue and he was in every magazine, GQ, every magazine you could think of. Back when there were magazines, he was in them. I think, how lucky am I, But here I am. Oh, I got to meet Julia Child. She came back into the kitchen one night, and just like those little things like that were just, in hindsight, were kind of insane. Like to meet these, cook and meet these people, So anyway, enough of me yammering on, man. You got things to do. You got to edit all my curse words out.
No, they all stay in. I have the podcast as rated, or in that sense, it's not made for children.
Well, clearly it's we're talking about restaurants.
It's chefs talking. I can't make that like child friendly.
Yeah. You can't make it G-rated for sure. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us at the Private Chef podcast. If you know any highly skilled chefs that want to take their life to the next level, make sure to share this podcast with them. And if you enjoyed this episode, click subscribe and check out our upcoming episodes. Thank you for listening.